This is John Kohler with DiscountJuicers.com. Today I have another exciting episode for you. One of the questions I get oftentimes is, hey John, what juicer is the best juicer for making nut milks? Now, in other videos and online, and when I respond to people, I generally tell them my favorite juicer for making nut milks is this guy right here. This is the Omega Vert 330 HD juicer. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to make a nut milk, almond nut milk, in both these machines so that you can see how they perform. So after we're done making the nut milks, we're then going to sieve out the nut milk that was produced using a strainer, and we're going to see how much pulp was left in each of the nut milks after it has gone through the juicer. So it is very simple and easy to make nut milks. The first step is you simply take 1 cup of almonds and you soak them in water overnight, and that's exactly what I've done here. I've taken 1 cup of almonds in each of these and soaked it in water overnight, and I basically filled it over the top of the almonds to just soak them completely. Now once this has soaked overnight, the next step is very important. You want to take and you want to pour off the soak water. So we have a strainer here. You could do this over your sink, you could do this over your garden to reuse this water. And what we're simply going to do is pour this water through the strainer, and we're going to catch all the soak water. Now, you do not want to use this soak water when making your nut milks. Why? You'd be like, hey John, aren't you wasting water there? No, you're saving your health. If you drink that soak water, you might get sick. You will be consuming enzyme inhibitors and probably other things that maybe aren't so good for you. So while this is good to water your plants and other things, it's not good for you to consume. So you can see here we've just drained out this these almonds. We're going to put them back in the bowl there. We're going to go ahead and drain out this one. Once again, we're pouring off all that soak water. We do not want to use this soak water. Simply, we just soak the almonds overnight, just enough water to cover them. Put the almonds back in there. And now with this water, we could water our plants outside. So next, what we want to do after we poured off the soak water is we want to add new water or fresh water, and I encourage you to use filtered water to make your nut milks. And so now you want to add 3 cups of water, of purified, clean, filtered water, to 1 cup of soaked almonds. So I have a total of 6 cups of water in here. We're going to add 3 cups to this one and 3 cups to this one. All right, that's about 3 cups there. Alright, I think that looks even now. So now we have 1 cup of soaked almonds with 3 cups of clean water in each bowl. And now all we simply need to do is make the nut milks. So now we're going to use the Omega Vert 330 HD juicer first to make the nut milk on this side. We're going to turn it on. We're going to take a nice ladle. And we're going to want to ladle, some nuts with some of the water into the machine at the same exact time. Now, if you put all nuts and no water, then you won't get a nut milk. If you put all water and no nuts, then you won't get a nut milk either. So some nuts, some water in the machine at the same time. And you can see instantly out of the machine we'll start to get the pressed cake, or basically the machine is literally grinding up and mixing the almonds with the water. And you can see on this side we're getting a nice, rich, and delicious almond milk coming out. Almond milks and other nut milks are great substitutes, and in my opinion are much healthier than regular dairy milks because they don't contain the foreign proteins. There's foreign proteins in dairy milks that may upset some people's systems. So with nut milks, unless you have a nut allergy, that isn't a problem. Besides nut milks, and actually I don't like nut milks personally that well. I like coconut milk much better. You could take a mature coconut, get the meat out, blend it with some water, and do the same thing. It'll extract the coconut milk out, which I believe is a lot healthier than actually the nut milks. Instead of the nut milks, I would recommend you do a seed milk. So the seed milks I like, or my favorite seed milk, instead of almond milk, I prefer hemp seed milk. And actually that's a really good milk because it's rich in omega-3 fatty acids. So we're almost done here putting these almonds and the water through the Omega Vert 330 HD juicer. Alright, so when you come to the end, we're just going to go ahead and pour the rest in there, and that's going to kind of filter through the machine. and make the rest of the nut milk. So we'll let that run a second. And now it's very important when you let these juicers work, you give them some time to work and be patient. And the thing that you may have noticed is that I'm not using the pusher to push things in the machine because you don't need it. You want to feed everything in to the Omega Vert at a slow and constant pace to let it have time to work. This is an extremely efficient machine, and you could take a look at this nut pulp, and I mean this pulp is really dry. I really can't squeeze any liquid out of it. It's amazingly efficient at doing nut milks. So there we go. There's our nut milk here. Next, we're going to turn the Omega 8004 Nutrition Center on, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to take our ladle and our bowl with water and almonds and ladle some almonds with the water into the machine. And this is pretty much self-feeding in the Omega 8004 Nutrition Center. Now this isn't necessarily going to work as well in this machine because what happens is this machine has a two-stage juicing, and right when you dump the water in, some of it will actually fall out of the bottom screen. So it's not going to be as efficient as the Omega Vert, where it literally mixes everything in much better. So we're continuing to make the nut milk in the Omega 8004 Nutrition Center. And in the Omega 8004 Nutrition Center, it's just not quite working as well because a lot of the water, instead of being pushed against the screen and being mixed with the nuts and pressed out, some of the water is actually running right through the bottom of the machine and coming out. So what's happening is that the nuts, the wet nuts, are actually being juiced, and it's coming out a little bit different consistency than the Omega Vert juicer did. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and pour the rest of this water in there and the rest of the nuts. Now this nut pulp's a lot different than this one. This one you could feel it's dry, and I don't feel a lot of fat in there. And that, when you're making nut milks, is what you want. You want the juicer to extract the fat from the nuts because that gives your nut milk a full, rich body taste. And in the Omega 8004, it didn't quite work like that because the nut flour that was created is still pretty rich, still a bit moist as well. So let's go ahead and turn this machine off and see what we got. So here's our nut milk here. They're both pretty dark. And here's our nut milk over here. So what we're going to do next is we're going to strain these guys out. So let me get the pitchers with the strainers. So now we have our two pitchers here, and we have our two strainers, and we're going to strain the nut milks. But before we do, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a spoon and simply mix up the nut milks to make sure everything's all mixed up in there together. Now, just by putting the spoon in, I could feel the nut milk consistencies. And in the Omega 8004, it's a lot more watery. This is a lot more full-bodied, like more of a rich nut milk. So let's go ahead and pour this one through the sieve. And as you could see, we're really not catching too much pulp here because the nut milk is really not a really rich nut milk. Next, let's pour this one through the sieve. And once again, we're not catching a whole lot of pulp either. So there you go. Actually, you know, the amount of pulp caught on each sieve is approximately the same. So that's definitely really interesting. But the final test is the taste test because the proof is in the pudding. I'm going to go ahead and taste this guy, see how it tastes. I mean, that definitely worked. It's really watery. Let's taste this one next and see how this one tastes. This one's definitely more full-bodied. So I could only say that that's why I choose the Omega Vert to do the nut milks, because the Omega 8004 doesn't really do it that well. And let me show you the problem with the 8004 and why it doesn't do that well. Because the Omega 8004 has a two-stage juicing. Now this is good when juicing, but bad when making nut milks. How it works is when you put things into the machine, the auger spins. As it spins, it crushes the produce. Juice comes out this bottom, and then the produce pulp continues to come out and get juice through this screen. The problem with making nut milk in the Omega 8004 is that when you put the water in and the nuts, the water instantly goes through this screen, comes out into your collection cup, and the nuts then travel down, which are partially wet and not fully wet, and then they're pressed out, so you more get a nut cream. And that is actually a really good nut cream, but once again, we're wanting nut milk and not nut cream. Yeah, that nut cream is really good. So for that reason, the 8004 is really not set up to do nut milks. Does it work? Yes, to make it really watery, and it's not really that good. So I wouldn't really recommend using the Omega 8004 for nut milks. I would recommend the Omega VRT 330 HD for making nut milks because it just works a lot better than the Omega 8004. Clearly, the Omega Vert did the job. The Omega 8004 didn't do the job. Now, the way Omega could improve this, and I have given them suggestions to do this, is to make this piece here, instead of holes, make it a solid piece. So when you feed things in, everything's forced down through the cone and then is juiced rather than comes right out. That would help it a little bit, but still based on the design, because everything's flowing down, the water will go straight down through some of the cracks of the juicer. So that's why I really like the Omega Vert for making the nut milks, and that's what I still recommend as your one-stop nut milk maker slash juicer. So hopefully you've enjoyed this episode, learning more about nut milks in the Omega 8004 and the Omega Vert 330 HD juicer. Once again, this is John Kohler with DiscountJuicers.com. Be sure to visit DiscountJuicers.com/YouTube for special promotional offers for our YouTube visitors.